The FBI released its annual hate crime report on Tuesday. It's published almost a year behind, so this report is actually for the full year of 2017. The report is an aggregation of hate crime incident data from across the country, which is important for a few reasons. One, this is the most complete hate crime data set that exists, so any claim about national trends in hate crimes should be made with reference to it, or the claim should get some skepticism. And secondly, this is the report that's usually cited, often in sloppy fashion, by media outlets claiming hate crimes are on the rise, and they imply or sometimes even outright state that it's Trump's fault. And when they do that, this is usually the report that they're working with, so it's important that we understand it. We saw many media outlets do this last year with the 2016 report. Hate crimes are on the rise, they reported, and you can blame the election and the campaign of Donald Trump for his hateful rhetoric about building a wall and restricting immigration from terror-prone countries, and for inadequately disavowing white nationalists in Charlottesville, even though Charlottesville was well after the data captured in this report. And almost none of this media coverage actually did the deeper analysis to identify what drove that observed increase in hate crime reports between 2015 and 2016. During those years, overall hate crimes in the FBI's report increased by 271 incidents. That's roughly 4%. That increase was driven primarily by a 5% increase in racially motivated hate crime. That was up 179 total incidents. And of the racially motivated attacks, the largest single share in the increase was hate crime against white people, up 107 cases. In fact, hate crime against white people was the largest bump in terms of individual cases for any specific group, racial, religious, gender, sexual orientation, or otherwise. That's not exactly supportive of the narrative that white supremacists are driving a hate crime spike in this country, unless they're self-loathing or attacking other white people for not getting with the program. And they're at it again this year with irresponsible reporting. The headlines are aplenty. The new hate crime statistics are out, and boy are they scary, a spike of 17%. And we'll check in with the Southern Poverty Law Center, who again assures us it's Trump's fault. And very broadly speaking, those numbers are true. The 2016 report showed 6,121 hate crime incidents for the year. The 2017 report shows 7,175 hate crime incidents. That's an increase of 1,054 cases. That is a 17% rise. But where these reports get negligent, maybe even maliciously deceptive, is failing to tell you why. Failing to tell you what's driving that broadly observable increase in hate crime incidents. If you go to the FBI's press release for the report, the most important explanatory factor is right there in plain sight. What changed this year? Well, most significantly, there are 1,000 more police agencies participating in this report compared to the previous one. Indeed, if you check the FBI's methodology description for the report, they explicitly caution against making year-to-year comparisons for exactly this reason. What this means is we likely don't actually have an increase in hate crime. What we have is an increase in local police departments across the country participating in the reporting of hate crime. After all, with 1,000 new departments participating, it's not necessarily surprising to see 1,000 additional hate crime incidents in the report. That's an average of only one report per department to explain the difference. But still, two things can be true at once. We can have both increased police participation in the reporting and meaningful changes happening in hate crime trends across the country. The problem for that narrative is that's not what the data show. If you compare the 2016 data to the 2017 data, the breakdown of hate crimes by the targeted group is nearly identical. About 58% of hate crimes are racially motivated, 22% are religiously motivated, 16% are motivated by sexual orientation, and there are small amounts of other hate crimes. There was a slight 6% bump in anti-Jewish hate crime in 2017, corresponding with a slight dip in anti-Muslim hate crime of 7%. But that difference is minuscule in what is otherwise a virtually identical breakdown. And that's not what we'd expect to see if the narrative about hate crime spiking were actually true. Presumably, if the hate driving these crimes is rising, we'd expect to see spikes in particular types of hate crime against particular races or against particular religions, especially if white supremacists are to blame. Instead, what we see is an almost exactly even increase in hate crimes of all categories, suggesting suggesting what we're observing is not actually an increase in hate crimes being committed, just an overall increase in hate crimes reported to the database. Like the other reports I've highlighted, this CNN editorial fails to mention that key detail of more police participation, a key detail the FBI itself emphasizes. But I want to focus on this article for a few additional claims it makes. It says, despite the reported increase, we know that many incidents, including some of the most horrific acts of bias-motivated violence committed last year, are somehow missing from the official statistics. Notably, James Fields, the man charged with the murder of Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, is missing from this report. Fields' trial is scheduled to begin on the Monday after Thanksgiving. Also absent are the Portland train murders of May 2017, in which Jeremy Joseph Christian has been indicted on a state hate crime charge. He has pled not guilty and is awaiting trial, reportedly set for June 2019. And lastly, there's the murder of an Indian man at a bar in Kansas in February 2017, not present in the FBI's hate crime report, despite the murderer pleading guilty to hate crime charges. But there are many problems with this CNN article's concern that certain cases are missing from the FBI's report. First, there are plausible reasons why these particular cases might be excluded. For example, the cases in Virginia and Kansas are on federal hate crime charges, not state. I searched the FBI's methodology for how federal charges are considered in this report, and I couldn't find a clear answer. But under this structure, it's entirely possible that local authorities in Virginia and Kansas didn't report these hate crime cases because local authorities in Virginia and Kansas didn't file hate crime charges in these cases. The federal government did. It's possible these cases are improperly missing from this report, but it's also possible they're accounted for and they're just in a different spot from where these CNN authors are looking. Secondly, the cases in Virginia and Oregon are still pending trial. The FBI leaves a lot of discretion to local police departments in terms of how they report hate crimes. It's possible that local departments in Virginia and Oregon didn't want to report hate crimes that haven't actually been determined to be hate crimes yet. We live in a country of innocence until proven guilt. So let's prove guilt first and then count the crime. And just from a statistical standpoint, yes, these three cases were high profile. Yes, these three cases received a lot of media coverage, but ultimately they are still only three individual data points in a data set of over 7,100 cases. If the point is that the data are incomplete, I need to see more than three cases to grant that point. The inclusion of these three cases would not change the overall data in any meaningful way. And lastly, it's curious that these CNN authors pair the point that the data are unreliable with the point that the rise in hate crime is absolutely real. Either the data are unreliable because they're incomplete, in which case the year-to-year trend is meaningless, or the year-to-year trend is a strong statistic we can rely on, but not both. These authors undercut their own headline with these competing premises. Oh, the hate crime stats are so scary, but also the data are unreliable and incomplete. Well, if the data are incomplete, how do you know the trends are scary? If the data are incomplete, how do you know the trends are true? Because of course the trends fit the narrative is the answer I think I would get were they kind enough to give me the truth. And I don't make these claims without evidence. I think these authors at CNN and in the rest of these reports are either negligent or malicious given how clear the FBI's description of its own report is. Either these reporters are so negligent that they didn't even bother to read paragraph 2 of the FBI's press release, or they're so malicious that they did, and they deliberately excluded what the FBI identifies as crucial information for any reader to have in understanding this report. I didn't go digging for this information. I didn't find it because I have some special skill in data analysis, or because I worked the phones to find some special inside FBI source. None of that. I have this information because it's highlighted as key information for us to have from the publisher of the information itself. So yet again, I don't think this is an example of reporter laziness. I think it's a deliberate effort to misrepresent and deceive in pursuit of a political agenda. And if these reporters want to tell me it's not, fine, go ahead. But then you need to explain to me why you haven't been fired several times over by now for negligence. It can be either or. but I'm gonna need at least one explanation. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.